Hello, YouTube. My name is Matt Godshall. I am the editor-in-chief of Unhashed.com, an information resource for cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. And today I'm excited to be joined by Rob Viglione, who is the co-founder and president of Horizen, formerly known as ZenCash. Hi, Rob, and thanks a lot for joining me today.
Matt, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot that I want to talk about. Of course, we're going to talk all about Horizen and the various projects that you and the team are working on. But first, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about you, your background, how you got involved in cryptocurrency, and ultimately ended up creating ZenCash, now Horizen.
Sure. So my background, actually, I'm a physicist, mathematician by background. But then I went back for my PhD work in finance, so asset pricing, and I was fortunate enough to have a department with faculty that would let me do Bitcoin asset pricing. So it was kind of fun and different at the time. And it actually turned into them hiring me back as an adjunct faculty member to teach Bitcoin and blockchain in the business school, actually. So that was kind of my history there. My work history, I guess I was a military scientist originally, working in Space Command, doing like intelligence, like satellites, so like spy satellites and launch vehicles. And
no big deal.
Yeah, right. No big deal. No big deal. And then let's see. So I actually was in Afghanistan for a couple of years, and it was while I was there that I started getting into Bitcoin more actively. And one of my buddies and I over there, besides just evangelizing to all the troops that we could find, we started setting up seminars where we were teaching about Bitcoin, like how to set up wallets, how to do transactions, and really what this technology can offer. And it was really working there that really shaped my perspective about where I think, like what parts of the world have the highest marginal utility for the technology, like where can it make the biggest difference? And I think it's in really kind of politically defined, volatile, I'll put it nicely, volatile parts of the world. So then I came back from my PhD, and then I started, once I finished the really hard parts, I shouldn't say that. I mean, it's really all very difficult, but like all the coursework, the comprehensive exams, the qualifiers, then I started getting a little bit more time on my hands, and I started getting involved in the industry. And I started working for a startup called BlockPay that was looking to do merchant services. So getting merchants basically to take cryptocurrencies. And then from there, I started joining other projects. Like I joined Z Classic, and then just very quickly got involved with the core team. And then from there, took part of the core team and part of the community, and forked off into ZenCash.
Cool. So what was the original inspiration behind forking away from Z Classic?
Yeah, so I mean, the big thing was, I joined Z Classic because I was fascinated, like completely fascinated with snarks, the zero knowledge cryptography applied into cryptocurrencies. I thought just mathematically extremely elegant. I thought, this is the future of privacy.
And can you briefly explain for any viewers who aren't familiar with what ZK snarks are, what they are?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, it's a certain class of cryptography called zero knowledge, which means really like what the terminology says. It's you have zero knowledge of any aspects of a transaction. So I could send you money, and no one could see that it was me who sent you, and no one could see that it was you, or what was sent. So it could be a message, it could be a transaction with money, or ZEN in it, or ZCash, which is where it was originally started. All you could see on the blockchain was that some valid transaction occurred that met all of the consensus rules, which means really there was no double spend, and life's good. So there's really no aspect of the transactions that you could possibly see there. Now it's very computationally intensive the way it is right now. So it's it's a very interesting kind of experimental technology that we're hoping to take so much further.
Cool. All right. So then you were talking about why you had split from Z Classic.
Oh, right, yeah. So on Z Classic, Z Classic was a project with a very, very narrow mandate. The mandate was essentially to mimic Zcash. So I came into it.
Fee and
yeah, exactly. Which in the long run is irrelevant. So in the short run, it's important. But then maybe I shouldn't say irrelevant. It's less relevant in the long run. But it does have some distributional aspects. So
sure.
Zcash had investors, and obviously investors want a return on their capital. So they built into the consensus just kind of a return path. So part of the money supply would be returned to early investors. And the way that we looked at this was, well, we wanted something that didn't have that. I mean, in this world of open source, you have that luxury. So or Z Classic was essentially a mimic of Zcash minus that.
Sure.
Then going to ZenCash we realized, well, there's so much more that we want to do, but we don't want to hijack this project because this project has value, but this project has value within some very narrow mandate. We wanted to do so much more. We wanted to decentralize everything, the governance, the treasury. We wanted to create a treasury, actually. And, we wanted to take the technology in a completely different direction, looking at like side chains for scalability, on-chain scalability with like a block DAG. So there's so much that we wanted to do that we just had no right to do within the Z Classic mandate.
Yeah, I mean, as you were listing off all of those things, one of the things when you're looking into Horizen that becomes very clear is that the project is very ambitious. It seems like you guys are doing everything.
Which is scary. I'll tell you as a manager, that's really scary because we have very limited resources and we have to focus them on what's most important.
Yeah, I'm sure that's quite the process.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, so, I mean, I guess we can talk about the rebrand now, or brand expansion, which there is an important distinction there.
There is.
So I'm curious, did the vision for ZenCash really, I mean, ZenCash, the white paper was only published in May of last year. So has the vision for the platform really changed dramatically leading up to the brand expansion? Or does the brand expansion kind of just better capture what ZenCash was always meant to be?
Really the latter. So the brand expansion going to Horizen was a professionalization of like what we had become and more importantly where we want to go. So we started with this white paper in May of 2017 and we've actually rushed through almost everything in that white paper, but there's so much more that we've evolved since then in the strategy and the planning. So really, like sidechains weren't even part of the original white paper, but sidechains to me are like our future, and really,
it's become pretty fundamental. It seems.
Absolutely, it's one of our core, technology differentiators. The other stuff was really cool from a privacy perspective, but it was really kind of a set of products that run with our blockchain. Now we're talking about completely revamping the blockchain to a block DAG. We're talking about sidechains. So we had to have like a reawakening, or kind of like let's circle back and think, where have we come from, what are we now, and more importantly, where are we going? So the rebrand or brand expansion was actually a huge part of that, of capturing this, very important messaging stuff. So that's, it was a huge effort, actually. It was like a huge, I can't even say huge enough times. It was very challenging, and I have to, compliment our team that put it together and actually executed on it. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to compliment the team because I think the name Horizen does a good job of really capturing, that goal of being on the technological frontier with, of course, the nod back to ZenCash.
Yeah, exactly.
For real quick, before we go any further, can you just give a quick explanation of what you would describe Horizen to be, just again for anyone who's not super familiar with the platform?
Yeah, I know this is always funny because you can go back and watch my other, YouTube videos and stuff, and it probably evolves a little bit every time.
Yeah.
So I mean, really, we're trying to, like, the vision is to flip upside down the kind of last 30 years worth of business model coming out of Silicon Valley, which is essentially tech companies. They have these great platforms that capture a trove of data that you create or hand over to them, and they monetize it. So what we're trying to do is flip that upside down. So really start with a privacy primitive where, we acknowledge that everyone has a fundamental right to privacy, and now we can start building a platform and applications around that concept. And that's exactly what Horizen is to use this blockchain technology, which we're evolving to a block DAG, hopefully, if things work out. And we think it's a perfectly decentralized platform with privacy embedded into it to ultimately endow individuals to own their digital footprint, and endow them with their digital footprint so they can monetize it or control it or wipe it or do whatever they want. So that's the vision. We use this technology to get there because we think it's appropriate for it. And that's really what we're all about. And we're building out a decentralized ecosystem that makes sense economically. We've thought very carefully about incentives across all the stakeholder groups. in our system. So it's a very complex project that we think has simple goals, which is really important because the goals themselves sound simple, but they're very difficult to get there. Just think like we're going up against like the Googles of the world, the Apples, the telecom providers, the social media platforms, the Facebooks, right? It's a really big endeavor, but it's not like we need to, conquer them or anything like that. I think we live in a world where we can live symbiotically. And for people who either, number one, care about their privacy, we're a great, platform and project to be part of. But more importantly, like, I think if we're going to win in this world, if we're going to actually create products that people are going to use, we have to give them a better reason than just an ideological tilt towards privacy. Like, we can't just tell someone, hey, privacy is really important, you should care about it. And then they say, well, I really don't care. This is a cool app.
Yeah.
If we can create cool apps that reward them economically and preserve their privacy, then I think it's a win-win all around. And that's where we're trying to go.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely, sounds good. I've noticed this language, this phrase, a fundamental human right to privacy, comes up quite a bit when you're talking about Horizen. Privacy sometimes in cryptocurrency gets a little bit of a bad rap because there's some critics who will suggest, why should you only want to remain anonymous or private if you have something to hide? What would you say in response to that kind of a criticism, and why do you think privacy is something that everyone should care about, presumably?
Yeah, so especially because as we're digitizing the economy or more aspects of our lives, like we're digitizing everything. We're putting our lives on digital platforms. We're putting our economic well-being on digital platforms. We're seeing that now that leaves people vulnerable. And this is why even governments, like in the European Union with GDPR, are mandating that companies preserve their customers' data and privacy. So what we're doing is we're decentralizing the process and making sure that companies don't even have the data. So I think what we're doing is actually very much in line with the intent of what a lot of the governments are doing. Now in the U.S., the U.S. really works hard on, say, like the war on drugs or the terrorism wars around the world. So they have this kind of, when it comes to military and intelligence, they're much more cautious about privacy. But you can see on the commercial side, we still have quite a bit of privacy in the U.S. in terms of the right to PGP, for instance, or the right to use Proton Mail, the right to free speech. So I think these are still rights that are preserved in our Constitution, Bill of Rights. So it's not like I think that what we're doing is contrary to governments. I think we're just trying to apply this philosophy in the consumer domain, which, when you pull out your cell phone, our data, our phone calls are encrypted. Like, we use WhatsApp, we use Signal and Telegram. So it's not like it's brand new what we're talking about. What we're talking about now is going deeper into the product domain and saying, well, hey, maybe even the telecom providers shouldn't be tracking our geolocation all the time. Maybe your geolocation should be yours. And if you want to sell it to marketers, you can do that, right? That should be your choice versus by using the device, you're giving up all of your privacy.
Sure. Yeah. And I feel like this is a topic that's catching on more and more recently. People are becoming more concerned about Google and Facebook and like Google search, for example, that nobody knows the algorithm, and that there's and Google is collecting ungodly amounts of data on everybody.
Exactly.
And this is data that we've sort of freely given away, almost without really realizing that that's what we were doing, just because the technology has changed so fast. And
exactly.
So I think projects like Horizen are kind of, maybe presumably could be the next gen of in this movement to take back control of your personal data.
That's exactly how I view it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to bash the Googles of the world and the Facebooks. Like, the world is much better for having those services. These companies have created tremendous innovation and value, or they wouldn't be so big had they not, right? So, but I think we can start thinking to the next step and start thinking about how to do these things better.
Yeah. So I guess with that, how do you sort of view Horizen's place within the broader cryptocurrency industry? You mentioned that you don't necessarily see yourself as having to be in direct competition with everybody. That being said, Horizen does seem to be combining some of the features that you'll find in different blockchain platforms. So yeah, just speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. So, our thing is, in the way that I view us in the competitive space, is we're building out a platform that's very privacy centric and massively scalable. So, I mean, what does that mean in terms of competition on the market? Like we do want to take a position where if you're a business and you want to build on a blockchain, or you have a D app and you want to build on a blockchain, you would choose our sidechain to do it. If you want to tokenize a product, rather than doing it on, say, an ERC20 token standard, you could potentially do it on ours, on a sidechain, like a token-specific sidechain. So we are positioning ourselves to actually be competitive, including like ZK snarks into our sidechain tech. So yes, we will be competing, but we still think that we're kind of, if you look at the different dimensions of like what are the dimensions of this industry, you've got smart contracting, you've got like platforms without necessarily smart contracting, you've got different types of privacy mechanisms, and different business functionalities. If you look at all of these, like we have some unique characteristics, but I think the industry needs a lot of competition and a lot of experimentation across all of them. So I think we'll forge our space where we're very business oriented, in the sense that like our team's very well structured, very organized. So for instance, we have partners that we're looking to actually build into our first sidechains, or use our sidechains initially. And like our approach is, we're not just creating an infrastructure and here come plug into it. We're saying we will dedicate a team to actually integrate you and make sure you have a great user experience, for instance, which is something that's a little different. I mean, the industry has been more about, let's create technology and then people will come and use it. Like ours is, we want to build technology, that suits users' requirements, and then we help them use it to make sure that they have a phenomenal experience. And that's our approach to things. So for segments of the industry where that matters, I think we'll be a very competitive player.
That's interesting. That's sort of a combination of not just providing a blockchain network, but also some elements almost of like blockchain as a service, where you're trying to actually make it very usable.
Absolutely.
Have you guys revealed you mentioned partnerships on sidechains. Have you revealed any of those yet, or are you ready to talk about that?
No, not yet. Unfortunately, our general counsel would kill me if I jumped the gun on that. Yeah.
Have to ask.
Of course.
All right. Well, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes really fast.
Yeah, no worries, of course.
So back to the brand expansion. Obviously, in terms of competing within the cryptocurrency marketplace, I imagine this brand expansion is hoped to play a decent role in that, because that's a part of how you interact with most consumers. What was the process like for the brand expansion? It seems like, obviously there's an inherent risk there. You don't want to alienate your previous community. It seemed like you guys really involved your existing community. And what's the reception been like so far?
So far, it's been phenomenally, overwhelmingly positive. No, of course, initially, we had like a very small set of people that were very much against it, like completely against it.
Sure.
So in anything that you do, you're going to have a distribution of reactions to it, right? And the distribution was very heavily skewed towards, this is a very positive thing. Like some people like completely loved it. I'd say, the majority of people, really liked it or maybe loved it. And then there were people that were indifferent. And then like on the tail of the distribution on the other side, you had those that just absolutely despised it. Like ZenCash was the best thing in the world, and any change from that was absolutely horrible. And that's fine. And there's also legitimate criticisms of maybe they just don't like it.
Sure.
And that's fine too. But the way that we did it was we brought on a very professional team. So we actually brought in branding experts and embedded them into our marketing team. And then we put together a series of inquiries to our community. So we had general surveys to the community, and then we had key stakeholders identified that represented a cross section of our stakeholder set. So like a very unique cross section. So we had those that were technically oriented. We had people that were more business oriented. We had people that were like key investors. We had people that were like actually former regulators, because we wanted to make sure also like how do regulators see this project. Like we don't want to be antagonistic to regulators, right? We
Sure.
recognize we live in a world that involves governments and regulators. So
you're going to have to interact with them at some point.
Exactly. So why not do it in a win-win scenario? So really what we did was we put together this cross-section of information from different stakeholders and synthesized that. So the team was kind of this, crack team of, branding experts with our marketers. They digested this trove of information and teased out the common factors. And the common factors really pointed them towards how do people perceive the project today, and then where do they want it to go. And from this, then they started formulating a message around that, like a message that captured what people want. And then they spit out like a name from that, or a set of names that then we could choose from. And then from there, it went into like logo design and then like an execution plan to make sure actually like unroll this to the market. So it was a very, very detailed and like.
How long had you guys been working on the brand expansion prior to the reveal?
So it was actually a 4 or 5 month project.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. It was in the grand scheme of things, 4 or 5 months sounds like not so much, but in the crypto world, 4 or 5 months is like 10 years. Yeah. So it was.
You guys have been working on ZenCash for like 6 months, and you're like, all right, we got to change the name.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, okay, so why change the name? So ZenCash. They pigeonholed us as a cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency is one of our applications, but it's not the grand vision of what we're trying to do. It's a really important thing. It's probably our most important product, but still, it's a product. It's not the entire project. So we knew we had to pivot at some point, and we figured, well, let's pivot to something that's actually very like logical and meaningful and like intentional for where we want to go. That kind of organizes things in a coherent way so that we have a path forward. So that's what we did, and I think it came off very successful.
Yeah, and obviously, if you are going to change the brand, then doing so relatively early on in the life cycle definitely feels better than waiting a couple of years.
Exactly, because there's kind of a brand equity that accumulates, right? Sure. And then when you pivot from there, you're actually cannibalizing that brand equity.
Yeah. So with all of that said, what are some of the things that you and the team are currently working on? Kind of next steps in the project roadmap.
Okay,
that you're hoping to finish out the year with, let's say.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. To finish out the year, so one of the coolest things we had on our team meeting earlier today, and we do team meetings 3 times a week where we have all hands and all the divisions report the big stuff that they're working on. And the coolest thing was the product team came forward with, okay, we actually received the final delivery of our flagship product. So we're not even calling it a wallet anymore because we're going beyond just being a wallet. Ultimately, this thing is going to be a really like amazing kind of all-inclusive application. So we just received that, going through like multiple iterations on it, and we're in the final iteration now. And we're testing it, and everything is looking amazing. So the product leader, Gustavo, actually came on today. He's been very cautious all along, and now he's like, this is amazing. Absolutely love it. So I'm super excited. We're going to announce an actual release date, but it's going to be the end of this month. So the end of November, you're going to have 2 amazing products hit market that I think will differentiate us. So we've been doing improvements and efficiencies and all that on our core tech, like with the 51% mitigation code and all this other stuff and more efficiencies. But unless you're a hardcore engineer, you don't really see that quality differentiator. Right. What you see is when you come to our website and you download a wallet and you see the wallet looks like, okay, what's special about this? These products are going to, be the wow factor. And that's what I'm very excited about.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome. It is you mentioned earlier the difficulty of trying to balance all of the various things that there are to work on, and like UI might be a thing that feels superficial or whatever, but realistically it is the interface that people interact with the platform through.
Oh my Lord, totally agree with you on that. Yeah, exactly. So we do have a big commitment to UI. We've spent 10 months actually developing these 2 very, very cool products. But then what else for the rest of the year? So on the core technology side, what gets me most excited is the sidechain stuff. The sidechain stuff is absolutely critical for our like future direction where we want to go as a platform, and for massive scalability. Because now, rather than try to force everything through the main chain, we can start parsing off specific things like a tokenization sidechain. And now, like anyone that wants a nice, rapidly scalable, massive transaction throughput, absolutely secure token standard, you can now use a Horizen sidechain. To me, that's absolutely critical because now there's a whole set of businesses now you can build on that.
Yeah.
So.
Do you want to, I know it's obviously a complex topic, but do you want to briefly
Yeah.
explain the Horizen sidechain solution?
Yes, absolutely. So our solution is what we think is the first truly decentralized sidechain model that's going to be hitting the market. So a lot of sidechains, or every sidechain up until now, has really relied on like a trusted set of, say, like validators, or nodes, or some validating entity that's going to say, these transactions, like the consensus, that conform to consensus and don't violate like a double spend or so forth. Ours is actually decentralizes the process and says you don't have to trust anyone, because we're building. It's kind of like an extension on the Nakamoto vision with Bitcoin, where you don't have to trust miners. You just know that they have consensus that they have to obey, or they can't participate. And if they really try to violate that, then they'll lose money unless they pull off like a 51%. So what we've done is we've generalized that now into a sidechain framework. So we can actually build entire blockchains into our ecosystem. So just take the single blockchain extension of this. You can build, say, like we said, a tokenization blockchain. So rather than doing tokenization like they do currently on Ethereum versus, like actually every token that's created runs on their main chain. Ours would be, we have a side chain that's a separate blockchain that has specific rules for how it's allowed to interact with the main chain, and vice versa. So you initialize the side chain from the main chain by committing some ZEN, and then you initialize the side chain, which is this independently operating blockchain that conforms only via a software developer kit, an SDK, or a set of APIs that just dictates the rules of engagement for how it's allowed to operate on the network. So it's very exciting, because now we can do like an unbounded set of things. Like we could have a real estate sidechain, so an entire real estate network ecosystem running on a dedicated platform where the rules of the system, the consensus, the token economics are optimized for a real estate network. We can do one for like a healthcare network. We could do one for a token standard, like a decentralized exchange. The thing with doing everything through a main chain is you have one consensus, like one set of rules that every operation must abide by. You don't need that with a sidechain model, because now you can do things that are very unique and very specific towards functionality. Sure. So it's very much user focused and like functionality optimizations.
How much freedom are, let's say, like the supernode operators going to have, or like how are the new consensus mechanisms decided upon for each sidechain?
By the sidechain developer. So
Okay.
the sidechain developer, yeah. So actually, what we have, and we're also doing some preliminary R&D on modernizing proof of stake consensus. So right now, there's some problems with proof of stake, like a nothing at stake issue, for instance. So very classic problems with proof of stake that we're trying to solve and optimize a proof of stake reference sidechain, so that basically businesses that want to build on a Horizen sidechain will have a reference model that they can just plug into. But really what we're building is an SDK, so that if you're a sophisticated developer team, you can build out your entire sidechain from scratch. It could be written in any programming language with any consensus mechanism, as long as it abides by the rules of the SDK. And the SDK only governs the interaction between the main chain and the sidechain. So what's exciting about this is, our main chain right now is C++, but you could potentially have a Golang sidechain. You could have a sidechain written in like JavaScript. You could have a sidechain written, or we have one actually. Our first one is going to be written in Scala. So you can take any programming language that can do blockchain-like things, and as long as it interacts nicely in a well-behaved way with our SDK, you could run your own valid sidechain.
Well, I mean, that sounds very exciting. Obviously, like the freedom to use multiple different programming languages in particular feels like it's going to go a long way towards increasing accessibility.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Plus, it's kind of like I was having a conversation earlier today about accessibility, and what do we want by accessibility? Is number one, like we want, like Ethereum does a great job. If you want to dork around with creating a token, you can do it in like 10 minutes as a novice, and that's amazing. So we want that type of environment as well. We want an environment where like any novice can come and in 10, 20 minutes have a sidechain. It may be economically irrelevant, it may never do anything, but to at least be able to initialize it and set it up. But we also want, on the other hand, to be a very sophisticated platform for or a platform for very sophisticated engineers that want to build, higher level stuff, and they're going to need more customization. So we want the whole gambit, and really, I think we're going to focus in a bimodal way where we'll cater to the novices for easy functionality, and then also to the very sophisticated engineers.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're a busy guy. I do want to have just one more question about the Horizen, but also kind of the broader cryptocurrency industry. So clearly, you guys are working on a million different things. And, the crypto industry lives by these market cap charts where people are continually tracking the prices of various things and often over-interpreting or over-analyzing. And I feel like there's this kind of strange disconnect between, the development teams of projects who have like roadmaps that are going like years versus these contrasts with the daily price movements. How much does the Horizen, do you guys pay any attention to price? And in general, how do you think that kind of interplay affects the cryptocurrency industry generally?
So we pay a lot of attention because our budget is entirely denominated in Zen. So our budget actually has been cut by 2/3 since the peak, in early part of the year.
Sure.
So it hurts us, and in fact, we've had to go through some very painful exercises in scaling down the team, and we're going through one right now. So it sucks. Like, we've built a team that we really love, and we think they're high performing. It's just that we're having to scale back and focus on the most important stuff. So it's hurt us, actually, the budget constraints. Now, at the same time, I think it's healthier for us in the long run because we're constantly learning how to do things, do more with less, and I think that's a really good thing. Because some of the other projects that just exploded last year and the year before, they kind of had these very bloated budgets and were throwing money at everything, and not in a very efficient way. And actually, ex post, we realized they wasted a ton of money. So we have the opposite problem, is we have to do everything in a very lean, mean, and efficient way. And in fact, even the fact that we're not one of the early projects in the space is, like, these early projects, I don't think they realize how lucky they had it, and that anyone that builds an exchange, anyone that builds a multi-coin wallet, they're going to include the big projects that just happen to be around from like 2014, just because they're,
especially if it's a fork of Bitcoin or something, which is just very easy to include.
Yeah, but then look at us. We have about 36 exchange integrations. We have like a dozen other like point of sale and web plugin for payment integrations, like things that we've had to earn every single one. Like we very rarely have projects that launch and just go and integrate us. We have an awesome BD team that's constantly on the market and striking deals to very aggressively get us out there into a much more usable posture. But in the long run, I think this makes us a much more efficient, robust organization. It's very good at making things happen, and just hasn't been, we're not spoiled, I guess I can say. We unfortunately don't have the luxury of being a first mover in the space. So I think in the long run, that's going to be much better for us.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Well, thank you once again so much, Rob. It was a real pleasure speaking with you. I think we covered a lot of topics, and I hope our viewers enjoy it.
Cool. Thank you for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.